This is an exciting time in Scotland's story, and understanding our past will help us determine our future. And when Scotland's voice is heard, it charts the way forward. This is Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Good morning and welcome to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond this morning from Edinburgh and Raeburn Place and the home of Edinburgh Academicals.
So today we're on after the rugby.
You mean not before the football?
No, because this is definitely a rugby club, actually the second oldest in the world. And on this famous ground in 1897, the Calcutta Cup, the annual tussle between Scotland and England, was born. But I've heard, Tasmina, there's an even more raucous occasion due to take place in this very place this coming summer.
Well, indeed, Alex, you may well be right, and viewers will remember that last year, round about the time when we started this show, Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond in the summer, we also launched our hit festival show called The Eyes Have It from the Spiegel tent. Well, this year we're bringing it here to Edinburgh Accies. And let's show you a wee reminder of what last year's show was like. Welcome everyone to the grand finale of The Eyes Have It. This is debate number 10 and we have a great evening in store for you today. And I'm sure you're going to behave yourself like the audience before you have not behaved themselves. The Nose, led by the Right Honourable David Davis, joined by Baroness Claire Fox and from Broxburn Academy, 14-year-old Sarah. Please welcome your team for the Eyes, the Right Honourable Alex Salmond, joined by from Broxburn Academy, 15-year-old Lena. Eleanor Lang.
You're simply the best. Better than all the rest. Better than anyone.
I remember a few years ago, as you will, the 2014 referendum campaign, when I was assured by the no side, by people like David, that there was no oil and gas left in the North Sea. It was all gone, it was finished, it was over, it was done with. Last week, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announces another 150 licenses. Where did it all come from? Magic. The vampire magician who was on immediately before us is responsible for Rishi Sunak finding all that oil and gas in the North Sea.
And he said, we'll see whether we can run our own country. Well, you've had an SNP First Minister for nearly 10 years. How's that worked out? Climbing hospital waiting lists, falling school standards, fraudulent ferries, gentlemen?
Remember Theresa May? Now is not the time. You were in Theresa May's government, weren't you, David? Now is not the time. When is the time? Why do they dictate when the time is? That's for us to decide when the time is for our own vote. Now, in Edinburgh, and I can say that because I do come from here, there's a saying, you'll have had your tea. Their view is, well, you've had your vote. Now you've had your vote, get back to the Spiegel tent and stop speaking. Not going to happen. We're big enough, strong enough, bold enough, intelligent and brave enough to be independent. Make a resounding aye tonight. And we hope to see you all at these up-and-coming shows in August at the festival. Now, what's coming up in today's show, Alex?
Well, of course, the starting gun has now been fired in the election campaign. So today I'll be speaking to some of the key ALBA candidates for Fife and the Lothians.
And you can look forward to hearing from Neale, Hanvey and George Kerevan after the break. We'll see you then. Welcome back to Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, and over to Alex, who's speaking first with Neale Hanvey MP and then our candidate for Lothian East, George Kerevan. Over to Alex.
Now, Neale Hanvey, have you got an explanation as to why the SNP have wandered up the highways and byways of identity politics instead of concentrating on their main objective of achieving Scottish independence?
Well, of course, that is a really important issue for me, something that was part of my falling out with the SNP, and no more clearly has that become apparent in recent days than with NHS staff who find themselves having to share the female changing spaces with trans-identifying men. And that's something that is really a significant problem across the NHS and an issue that I'm dealing directly with in my constituency.
Now, that's happening now, despite the fact that the self-identification legislation has been stymied for now, but that's actually happening in your constituency.
It's actively happening, and women are being targeted by NHS bosses for seeking to secure their privacy and dignity in their changing spaces. They are being targeted by bosses against legislation, against the current legislative provisions. And it's a very serious problem. And when we've got not just the SNP, let's be clear, this is a UK Labour problem, it's a Lib Dem problem, an SNP problem and a Green Party problem. They're absolutely terrified of standing up for the rights of women and defending women's dignity and privacy in the workplace and indeed in most spheres of life.
But ALBA will have no such reservation.
Absolutely none whatsoever.
So ALBA is standing up for women's rights and Scotland's rights.
Indeed.
Neale Hanvey, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond.
Most welcome, Alec.
Well, George Kerevan, back in the fray in Lothian East, because you were previously the Member of Parliament for East Lothian, as it was called then.
I had a great pleasure of being the MP there for a couple of years after our big Nationals win in 2015. You know what's great about being an MP? You know more about your constituency and you meet more people than anybody else, and it's a great kind of experience to take back into the fray.
And of course you're lining up against another Whale-Kent face in Douglas Alexander. Now, for the viewers who don't remember, he was New Labour personified. He was a loyal follower of Tony Blair, followed him right into Iraq. So presumably this subject might be raising its head in the campaign.
Yeah, Douglas Alexander, he was in the Cabinet Office and then he was in the Cabinet. I mean, he's been close to the centre of power, a Blairite before Blair and then a Brownite. He has never, in all this time, apologised for going into Iraq, for supporting the Americans, for an illegal war that saw 500,000 people dead. Amazing. He's never apologised. So one of my themes for this campaign is to ask Douglas, because he could be Foreign Secretary, remember, when Labour gets in.
According to Douglas, he's going to be Foreign Secretary.
Yeah, so you know, well, now we know why he's standing. But he has to apologise for Iraq. Why? Not just because it's the right thing. If he doesn't, then he's likely to do the same thing again when he's Foreign Secretary. He's likely to lead Britain into other wars. We cannot have that. So it's an important issue. Why they? I have no idea why Labour wants to resurrect the dead body of politically of New Labour. And certainly talking to people on the streets in East Lothian, they're not at all happy.
So you've got a Labour candidate, Douglas Alexander, who quite literally has blood on his hands in terms of his previous political decisions. You've got an SNP candidate who fled the field before the election started. So I think it must be quite fancy your chances for ALBA.
Well, you know, it's just great to be out there in the field. I think the problem with this election in Scotland is that after everything that's happened, a lot of national supporters are just going to sit on their bahookies and not come out to vote. So where ALBA fits in is we are mobilising that vote. We're saying to people, everything is still to play for. It's still important that you get out there and vote. And if I can just get people to vote, you know, that's what's important in this election, that we register again, as ALBA wants to do in every election, support for independence. And when we get a majority at an election, then we can negotiate for Scotland's freedom.
And if you had to identify the biggest social and economic priority for Lothian East, what would it be?
Well, we're the heart of Scotland's energy industry. This is where a lot of, apart from Aberdeen, this is where the offshore wind power comes. And it goes in a big electric line right across East Lothian, all the way down into England. We don't get any of it. All the jobs we were promised from John Swinney, 100,000 jobs, not there. So we need, one of the issues is to make sure that we get some of the gains from that industry that we have created. Also, we've got a big farming, wonderful farming community in East Lothian. The farmers are being shortchanged right, left and centre. The fishermen, we've got fishing villages. East Lothian is a little microcosm of all of Scotland. So there's a whole series of economic issues. But obviously because of post-Brexit, we simply don't have control over how the economy works. We need that here.
George, you've had a career as a political activist, but you're also a well-known economist. I mean, how frustrating is it as an economist to see Scotland not fulfil its potential in terms of the utilisation of its resources for the betterment of the people?
Scotland's economic growth has been near zero since the banking crisis, not just since COVID. And we're sitting on wonderful resources, not the least of which is our people. We have 4 of the best universities in the entire world. And I've got a university also in East Lothian, Queen Margaret. We have one of the best trained workforces. We have all these raw materials and resources. We have all this energy, and we're getting poorer. Now, for an economist, that's just, it drives me crazy. That's why, that's the bottom line. When you go on the door, independence is an abstraction. We need power back here to control the economy to solve some of these problems.
Well, George Kerevan, more power to your elbow, and thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex and Tas.
Coming up after the break, I'm going to continue my mini-series within this series on Scotland's indie heroes, where I speak to activists about their campaigning for independence and their hopes and aspirations for the future. And this week you have a treat in store. So while I head back to the studio, we'll see you after the break, or rather I won't, but Alex will. Stay tuned.
Water is life, but not all water is equal. Our water ionizer restructures and alkalizes water for optimum hydration and detoxification, recreating the planet's ultimate water sources, found in lightning-struck lakes and newly melted icebergs. H2 Pure Source. Change your water. Change your life.
And now we turn to that point in the show where I normally say it's time for Scotland's Hidden Heroes with Alex Salmond in association with Flagship Media. But as I said a couple of weeks ago, we're very keen to give some important airtime to some of our real independence activists and see what they have to say about the state of play in the independence movement and our quest to restore our nation's freedom. And I'm delighted to be joined today by David Maitland. Welcome to the show.
Delighted to be here. I've been watching you for a long time and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, David, for joining us all the way from Aberdeen. Now, David, of course, you've been politically active for quite a long time, 25 years a member of the Labour Party, stood for election and became a councillor for the Labour Party in Aberdeen. However, in 2014, you voted for independence for Scotland in our referendum, and now, of course, you are a member of the ALBA Party. Please tell us a bit about your journey to independence and to ALBA.
Well, when I was a member of the Labour Party meant what it said. They were a workers' party, and they've changed. And they lost me, well, I would say over 10 years ago, and I stood for election. I became an elected member, and I worked very hard. But I tasted the bitter side of politics when I left, and since that time I hadn't done anything with politics. I walked away, and it wasn't until Alex started the ALBA Party that I started to look again. And I didn't join the ALBA Party straight away, not by any manner of means. I kept a watching brief for some time, and when it looked like they're the party for me, I started to investigate further. A friend of mine joined the party. Became much more interested, and then on further investigation I found, well, I've actually found my political home again. So I was only too happy to be a founder member of the ALBA Party, and from that day to this, as things have progressed, as the parties have, if you like, Tories and Labour have moved further together, the SNP have moved further away from Scotland, then I've known that the decision that I made to join the ALBA Party was absolutely the right one.
And of course, you spoke a couple of weeks ago at ALBA Party's campaign conference in Lochgelly very passionately about your profession, what you do for a living. Of course, you work in the energy sector. Let's turn to hear a few excerpts from your speech.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Well, I've appeared here on a number of occasions speaking up for energy at our conferences. But this time I'm here unexpectedly, so I'm here with no script, and you're getting this one straight from the heart. 35 years ago last month, 35 years ago I first started working offshore. This time yesterday I was on shift, on a rig, on a diving system, and then at the last minute they said, you're getting off, and I'm here today. That's why I'm not prepared. But I really knew I had to be here, and I had to say a couple of things. Aberdeen is the city of my birth. I've lived there all my life. I've worked offshore for all my working life. We're losing hope. There's a real air of depression offshore. We're all worried. And the reason we're all worried is because of the party that I used to be a member of. Unlike many of you guys, I came from the Labour Party. And now the biggest threat to the city of my birth, the city where I live, the career that I've followed, is in fact the Labour Party. Great British Energy poses a huge threat. It's not the biggest threat that we face. The biggest threat that we face is from the Labour Party and their policy that we will have no more North Sea oil. Great British Energy is a facade. They've already cut the funding before they're even in government by over 80%. So I'm here with a message. I'm a message of hope for the people of Aberdeen, because our only hope is the ALBA Party. And I'm here with a message of thanks. Thanks to everyone in the ALBA party who have supported my motions over the years, and thanks to Kenny McCaskill. Because Kenny McCaskill is in fact the only hope that we have. I say we because the Labour Party want to kill my local community. The Labour Party want to kill my and all my colleagues' careers. Our only hope is the ALBA party. Our only hope is Kenny McCaskill. And as we saw on Thursday night, Alex Salmond. So with that, I'll leave you with this. Please keep the fight, because you are our only hope. The only hope for my community, the only hope for my livelihood. Please keep up the fight, Kenny, because you are our only hope. And thank you very much indeed for everything you've done so far. Keep the fight.
Of course, that was a very passionate intervention in the debate about your personal experience from working in the sector. Tell our viewers a bit about that.
Well, I felt quite emotional when I was doing it. You obviously have nerves when you're on stage and things, but as I progressed through it, I did feel myself get quite emotional because I know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what I'm seeing on the streets, what I'm hearing at home on the ground, and what I'm hearing on more and more on the decks offshore. So I've got experience of both. I've been in Aberdeen my whole life. As I said in my speech, it's my hometown. I love it. I've worked all over the world. I've always come home to Tasmania. I always come home to Scotland. Always come home to Aberdeen. And I've worked offshore for 35 years. Yes, I had a gap to be an elected member and things like that. But I first started in the late 80s, and here we are. I'm still offshore today. And it was pure chance. It was just the way that things happened that I ended up in a chopper on Friday evening. And there was no way I was going to let the opportunity go. I've spoke at many conferences before on energy issues. I had no intentions of even being there because I was working offshore. But by luck, I just happened to get the opportunity to attend. Now, I went there with no notes, no preparation, no nothing. I was speaking, as I said, from the heart. And what I have to say is this, and it's really, really important, that over the last couple of years since Labour and the SNP have expressed what they want to do with the North Sea, with the oil industry. People got worried. Offshore and onshore, people got worried. Now it looks like Starmer's going to get into number 10. It really does look like that. So they've gone from being worried to being genuinely scared of Starmer. Now, people have been scared of the SNP because they were in coalition with the Greens for quite some time. But that's here in Scotland. When it's going to be in Westminster, people are now really worried. They're really scared. So they've been scared of the SNP for some time, but now they're genuinely scared of Starmer. And it's the topic of conversation in my hometown, on the streets. It's the topic of conversation on the decks offshore. And we're looking at, as I said in my speech, the killing of our communities. Our communities can be killed. We've seen for decades now what happened to the coalfields in Fife. We've seen what happened to the steel industry in the Central Belt. That's what's coming to Aberdeen, and we know it. That's what's coming to the offshore industry, and we know it. So that being the case, people are right to be scared, and that's what I had to put across in my speech on Saturday. Totally unprepared, no script, no pack drill, nothing. It was from the heart, because I'm seeing it all day, every day. I feel emotional now talking about it, because it's my hometown. It's an industry I've been in for almost 4 decades, and it's being ripped apart. And there's a lack of investment because there's so much uncertainty. So businesses are looking at it and saying, why on earth would we invest in a North Sea that's heading for oblivion? Why would we invest in the northeast of Scotland when there's nothing there? What would we do that for? So we're looking at a very, very bleak future, both offshore and onshore, in northeast of Scotland, and on our oil rigs and our vessels, and that's why people are scared. That's what I want to put across. And can I just say this as well? What I wanted to do was say to our parliamentarians, pick up this mantle and run with it. You're now well aware of it. I've made you aware of it. This is what's actually happening. And to say to our delegates as well, pick this up, let people know. And the reason I'm saying that is this. When I speak to people about what ALBA's doing, what Alex is doing, what Kenny's doing, you can see it in their face. There's relief. that there's someone shouting for us. You know, we're not alone in this anymore. But we need to get that across because we're not getting it in the media. We're here in Scotland Speaks. Yes, we're getting the message across, but we need everybody out there to let people know. And that way, we'll be able to win at the ballot box. We'll be able to turn this thing around, and we'll be able to stop the SNP, and we'll be able to stop Stammer in his tracks. Without that, there's a really bleak future for Aberdeen and North East of Scotland.
And how important do you think, I mean, I'm taking from what you're saying that there's no confidence in the workforce for this great British energy plan from Keir Starmer, or indeed prevarication over the future of the oil industry from the SNP have been nothing but unclear about what that actually means for people. Can we take from that then that you're satisfied that Kenny McCaskill and indeed Neale Hanvey, Ash Regan, the Scottish Parliament, and Alex as an oil economist understand what we need to deliver for the industry for it to be successful, number one, and number two, how key is getting that right going to be as we advance the case and secure Scottish independence?
Well, look what Kenny's already done. Look what Alex has already done. We saw, well, a couple of weeks ago now on Question Time, just how Alec completely wiped the floor. The grown-ups are now back in the room, and he exposed Flynn and he exposed Sarwar for what they really, really are. And that is the enemy of the offshore oil industry. It is the enemy of Aberdeen and the North East of Scotland. Their policies over the last few years, the SNP's policies the last few years with the Greens, have done nothing but be detrimental to our industry and our communities. And now what it looks like, that Labour's going to be even worse. So that being the case, no, there's little hope. But when you do give them hope, when you do let people know what Alex and Kenny are doing, look what Kenny did in Grangemouth, turned it round.
And continues to do, of course, is continuing to fight for Grangemouth, absolutely leading the charge.
Leading the charge
to keep Scotland's only oil refinery open, how key that is, of course, to the industry as well.
Well, imagine an oil nation like Scotland without its own refinery. It beggars belief. I mean, what were they thinking? But it was Kenny that led the charge and continues to lead the charge. And Grangemouth has had a bit of a reprieve, but let's not be too certain about this, because it's an election year. So let's be wary about this. It's great news. It's great news so far. But let's keep a watching brief on that. I'm sure Kenny absolutely is, and he'll keep campaigning to keep Grangemouth open. Also, Alex, the only voice in the North East of Scotland. He's based in the North East of Scotland. He's the only voice there who's constantly promoting our oil and gas industry, and it always has done. But we have to make sure that everybody's aware of it. Give them the opportunity to choose. They do have a choice. It's not the doom and gloom from the SNP and the Labour Party and Stammer's Labour Party. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, Tasmina, and letting people know that. You could, as I said, you can see it in their face, you can hear it in their voice. Suddenly, offshore and onshore, there's hope. There's hope. We've got someone fighting for us now. We're not alone.
Not alone.
And it's and that was a word I used on Saturday, is hope. It's giving people hope that there are people out there, and that is the ALBA party. It is our parliamentarians, it is our leader who are out there fighting the fight, because the battle's just starting. It really is just starting now, and it's a battle to save our communities, it's a battle to save our careers, it's a battle to save our entire industries, and it's going to be it's going to be a hard battle, but we can't not fight and we can't not win. So yeah, that was the message I was getting across on Saturday. It's the message I'm giving you now, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to do it, but we would need more people out there. There is a message of hope here from the ALBA party.
Indeed, David.
We need to get that out.
Thank you very much indeed, and of course we use every effort to make sure all of our activists are getting our energy policy
Absolutely.
in the psyche and the knowledge of people across the North East, and of course beyond that. But David, for now, thank you so much for joining me on Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond, and all the very best. You can be guaranteed we're going to keep campaigning for the future of the North East of Scotland. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm still here at the Edinburgh Academicals ground in Raeburn Place in Edinburgh, a famous ground and a famous club. They got to the Scottish Cup final at Murrayfield this year. Didn't win it, but they were very, very close indeed. Now, what we learned from this week's show, I think the underlying theme from all three interviews was that of mobilisation. hugely important for ALBA as we move into this election campaign. Because obviously the jibe is going to be thrown at us by the SNP and by others. Why are you splitting and wasting the independence vote? Despite the fact, of course, that for 10 long years, the Scottish National Party have done nothing to further the cause of Scottish independence. But that's the accusation that will be levelled. And what interested me in each of their own separate ways, our interviews today answered that and answered it completely. Because ALBA are not splitting the independence vote, we are mobilising the independence vote. The greatest single danger to independence in this campaign is not just people who support independence going out and voting for one of the unionist parties. It's much more likely they'll sit at home demoralised by the lack of progress towards independence, and that's where ALBA comes in. Our job is to motivate the independence vote, for people who believe in independence to come out and vote for it. Because one thing you can be certain about ALBA is every vote counts for independence. So I hope you enjoyed today's edition of Scotland Speaks with Alex Salmond. We'll be back at 10 a.m. next Saturday on more social media platforms than you can shake a stick at. But let's play out with some of the campaigning pictures from thus far in the election campaign.